what I'm excited to be doing at the training center is trying to straddle the line between discipline, commitment, effort, performance, and a healthy, sustainable relationship with the sport. Because you're right, 14 is kind of old in gymnastics. And the last thing that I want is for 14 to be old in climbing. I want these kids to be psyched on climbing until they can't stand up anymore.
Welcome to the Testpiece podcast. This podcast is about all things high-level climbing. How to go from good to great. I'm your host, Joshua Horsley. I've been climbing for over 30 years. We recently updated our Patreon, and now you get exclusive content from the guests that you love. You get your episodes before everyone else, and they're ad-free. Try it out now at patreon.com/testpiece with a free 7-day trial. Okay, let's start the show. Zoe Sayetta, Julian Acevedo, welcome to the pod. How are you doing?
We're doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, psyched to be here.
I'm psyched to talk about climbing gyms, youth training. These are some of my favorite things because I started climbing as a youth in one of the earliest climbing gyms in America. And now 30 years later, those are two separate things. Not only do you guys have cool gyms, you got youth training centers also.
Yeah.
Julian, you are one of the founders of GP81, an famous, I always get I don't know how it works, an infamous New York gym that kind of either ushered in a new era or was a throwback to kind of the roots of indoor climbing. I want to say you guys coined the term anti-mega. Is that right? Is that from you guys?
Yeah, it was one of our founding partners, Michael Cesari. He owned a few gyms in Manhattan, and he was the one that, kind of put us in place to be able to get GP81 open. And he was operating 2 commercial gyms. They were both very, smaller in footprint, and they all felt really kind of homey. But seeing all the other gyms growing and all that, he was like, we're not going to allow kids in GP81. And, that's kind of anti-mega, so then it just took off from there.
All right. I like that foreshadowing of not allowing kids because GP81 recently opened the youth training center, which is definitely pro kids. And Zoe, you were brought on to help lead that program. Before we get to the youth training facility, anti-mega, what does that mean? Like, what was kind of the founding story of GP81? Maybe take us back to when it opened and what the scene of climbing gyms looked like in that era.
Yeah, so I believe the lease was signed back in 2017, in the spring of 2017, and I was actually just returning to climbing. I had taken a few years off from working in the industry, and my friends, both Clifford Sumansky, who's one of my partners at the moment, Dan Yagman, was a founding partner then, and then he now runs Decoy Holds, and then Michael Cesari. They're the team that kind of came up with the idea. And I was there from early on, and it was just about getting all of us together in a place where we can climb and train together. And so it just, it was very weird at the moment because no kids allowed, and that kind of made it appealing to all the other folks that felt that the bigger gyms were just getting flooded with people, and the kids were just running all over the place. And so for us, it was kind of an easy thing to do, and that's where it started.
Yeah. I just want to tell you, I was out on the West Coast and I was loosely involved in some new gyms coming up, and I would literally see the term anti-mega in their pitch decks. They pointed you guys out and said, look, we've had this amazing growth in climbing where we've had, I don't want to name any names, and I also don't want to say anything bad about these really big gyms because they brought a lot of people into climbing, but did seem to allow for a niche to open up in that period. And you guys were kind of the ones to lead the way and say, hey, instead of bigger, more and more birthday parties, what if we made something that was more oriented towards, I don't know what you want to say, like the climber's climber. And so it sounds like excluding kids was one of those things. Was there anything else in the design or the way you wanted to run the business that also narrowed it into that niche?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. For us, it was the smaller footprint, which made it a little more manageable. When running a business, you don't really have to worry about a huge overhead with rent and, steeper angles, walls that we wanted to climb on, and the space being a smaller footprint. And it just meant that, all the folks in there got to know each other, and it made it a lot more intimate. And any of the decisions that we made day to day kind of impacted everybody, like really directly. And so it just, held us accountable for everything. And so we were present all the time, and it just allowed us to grow with the people, with the staff, and just, kind of guided us to where we are today.
So I got to visit GPA one not long after it opened. I want to say it was either 2018, 2019. I was visiting New York on my way, actually on my honeymoon to Europe. And I see this door, I'm on Google and I see a door. I walk through and there's the gym. And the thing that stood out to me was that you said steeper angles, but also very flat panels. So I was actually, or I was kind of on my way out of route setting at the time, but I had lamented all these curves and then you'd start, it was kind of the birth of really a lot of volume use too. And I was just like, we can't even use these because we have these old walls. And so, yeah, anything else on kind of like the wall design, the hold bys, even the setting that you guys leaned into?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on with the flat angles. A lot of the bigger gyms just had a lot of changes in the terrain, and it did make it very difficult for the setters to work with the product or put up the product. And for us, it was the flat angles. Yeah, just the steeper, 30, 45, 60. Our friend Dan, we actually worked with him while building the space out to shape and pour holds that we carried at GP81, that nobody else had for, a year and a half. And so it was cool to be able to do that and just say, hey, we need some pinches. And, looking back, it wasn't done well in a way that it could have been managed better, but we were all learning, and it was just a great experience for us all to be working in it together. And, it was something new, and it worked.
Oh, that's so cool. You guys also poured your own holds. I mean, Dan, is famous, and Decoy Holds is huge and has its own even system board. So having that as part of the founding team is huge, because then you guys get to care from the shaping of the holds to the angles to the route setting. And yeah, the flat panels, I don't know if people really understand this if you haven't set, but what ends up happening is you feel like you just set the same thing over and over again. You're like, okay, I know this arete. I'm going to go into the hold bin and it's going to be a little different. The holds will be a different color, but you just kind of get into this routine. And so flat panels are more special than people think. And also a 60 degree. I remember I love steep angles, and just seeing that front and center next to a 45, which is about as steep as you get. So it really resonated with me, Julian. It really did.
That's great.
Okay. Well, the one thing that I got to ask about is you're in New York, which, what's the saying? Like, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. I don't know. I feel like there's a Broadway show there or something. And, the climbing gym business is not easy. Like, how did you guys, figure out a business model instead of, pouring in, a $10 million facility and then charging $200? I actually have no idea what the prices are like in New York, but I should just say this. It's difficult to run a business, and probably even more difficult in New York City. And just how'd you guys think about making that all work?
I mean, honestly, when I came into the project, it was more of, kind of just trial by fire. Like, you're in the position and you're going to have to make it work. We all came from having worked in the industry before. And so we had an idea of what the expectations were, and a little bit of the vision that we had, talked about. And so for us, it was just show up, do the best that we can, and just hope that our goodwill in the community will translate. And fortunately for us, we've been really fortunate with the staff and the folks in the community that just have always shown up, and we're still here. So I'm happy about that.
Well, not only are you still here, but you all are opening a new facility, the Youth Training Center. Tell me how that came to be and how Zoe joined the project as well.
Yeah, so we ended up going through a little bit of a rough patch with GP81. Our landlord at our previous location, he just gave us a pretty quick notice, and he was just like, "Hey, you guys have this few months, and you have to be out because I'm tearing the building down." And so it was all hands on deck for a long time, trying to find a space, think of potentially rebuilding, not rebuilding, and whatever. Eventually, we ended up finding a space here in Bushwick, and as we reopened, there's always a lot of churn in the industry here when like big gyms, I don't know, like the coaching and some of the setting people just kind of move around. And then Zoe approached us and was like, "Hey, I'm interested in starting to bring my kids in." And yeah, I guess that was a quick intro for us, and that's it.
So Zoe, why did you approach Julian? Yeah, give me a little bit of your backstory and how you ended up coaching in New York.
Yeah, so I've been coaching youth sport for almost 20 years now. I started coaching competitive gymnastics. I was a gymnast growing up when I was like 15 or 16. And I did that for about 10 years. And really towards the middle of my tenure coaching gymnastics, I kind of tired of the fairly toxic culture. And I had plans to leave coaching altogether. And, kind of as that was happening, I found rock climbing. I didn't even know rock climbing existed. I had no idea it was a sport as a gymnast growing up until I walked into Berkeley Ironworks in the Bay Area.
Awesome gym.
A Touchstone gym. Yeah. And yeah, I was like, oh my God, how did I not know that this was a thing? And I started climbing just for fun, and I became friends with the head coach of that gym at the time, a good friend of mine now, Zach Wright. And he was like, "Yeah, do you want to coach climbing?" And I was like, "No, I really don't. I am done. I don't think I'm a coach anymore. Like, I think this is it for me." But one thing led to another. And I guess at some point I said yes. And I started out coaching recreational climbing, and the vibe was just so different. The community was so different. The culture was so different. And eventually I started coaching the competitive team, and then ended up as the head coach of one of the SoCal Touchstone Gym's competitive teams. And that kind of ran into 2020 when I was graduating from my master's program in Southern California. I studied sport and performance psychology and graduated into the pandemic, and went out to New York with an ex-boyfriend and started working at the Cliffs at the time. Gowanus, the gym in Brooklyn, was just opening up. And so I kind of started their competitive team. And I did that for a few years and learned so much throughout that experience about being a head coach and what it really was like trying to lead a group of kids within a commercial space. And like throughout that process, I learned that it was no longer aligned with my goals and values to run a competitive program in that context. And so I decided to move on from movement. And I kind of did this like really bizarre hybrid program. I had 10 kids who came with me out of movement, and we called ourselves Team Matrix. And I wrote programming for them, and we rented space at a CrossFit box once a week, and we trained at the CrossFit box, strength and conditioning. One of the rules in USA Climbing is that you have to be with your team. You have to train your athletes at least once a month in person in order for you to be considered a team. And so that was kind of the immediate solution to the problem was a CrossFit box would rent me space. And then my second solution was reaching out to GP81. And they were awesome enough to allow us to come in on Sunday mornings before their gym opened. And that was kind of the first taste I got of what it was like to coach my team, a group of kids, in a space without any other members present, because we were there before the gym opened. And it was just so much fun. And it opened up a whole new world of what would be possible if we had our own training space where the space was catered to the kids themselves.
Anti-mega kids team. Interesting. Uh, Zoe, sorry, just take you all the way back to when your first thing is you said you were in gymnastics until 15 or 16. Is that what you said?
Yeah. I think I quit competing when I was 14 and I started coaching when I was 15 and a half.
The reason why I ask is that for those who haven't been gymnasts, that's actually pretty old in gymnastics. That means you probably were doing it for quite a while. And, gymnastics is very competitive. When you're on team, it's because you're competing, or at least that's how I was always taught. And every program I've seen, it's a very intense program. And so am I right that you were competing and had been doing it for a while at that point?
Yeah, definitely. I had been doing it since I was really little, and I was on the competitive team, and I was not a good competitor. I did not have a lot of kind of typical competitive success in gymnastics, but I loved the sport so much, and I loved trying hard and the discipline required to do it. And I think it was a structure that was really important in shaping my coaching philosophy moving forward.
So the reason why I just pick on that is that I also came from gymnastics, and it was intense and in a great way. Just like you're saying, there's a lot of discipline. And as a absolutely wild little boy, I needed that discipline. And then I found climbing and I thought, this is great. It's wide open. And I was on a team, but it was the early days of climbing. And when I say team, it was like, they had some adults watching us, and no complaints. So wonderful time in my life. But it was wide open. And as I've seen climbing progress, I don't want to see youth teams become toxic. There's a side of gymnastics coaching that I don't think is worth getting into, but there can be some brutal stuff there. But that discipline and that rigor and that intensity also has its benefits. And so, are you kind of trying to bridge that gap between just the wildness of anything goes in climbing and some of that gymnastics still has something special to it,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there are obviously a lot of virtues in the sport of gymnastics and a lot of virtues in the sport of climbing. And yeah, I think that what I'm excited to be doing at the training center is trying to straddle the line between discipline, commitment, effort, performance, and a healthy, sustainable relationship with the sport. Because you're right, 14 is kind of old in gymnastics. And the last thing that I want is for 14 to be old in climbing. I want these kids to be psyched on climbing until they can't stand up anymore, and as a gymnast, like you just can't sustain that. Your body can't sustain it for very long, at least in the way that it currently exists. So yeah, I'm interested in finding a way to make that different in climbing.
Okay. I do want to dive into that. And I also just want to point out how important coaches are. I always do this anytime I talk to coaches, just how important they are to our lives, where you had your team follow you when you left a mega gym, and they still wanted to work with you, Zoe. And that's because I think people underestimate how, yes, kids love their sport, but often they love their coach and their team more than the sport. And I think over time, maybe the balance of where that love is changes and grows. And, I'm not on a team anymore, but I still love climbing. And just, want to point out how important the coaching and kid relationship is. But then you approach Julian, and Julian, you guys had a facility where kids were not allowed, except for when it was closed, evidently, and all the adults were still hungover from going out too late on Saturday. That's a big leap to then open a facility dedicated to kids. Can you kind of take me to the behind the scenes on the GPA one side where you guys said, oh, well, let's actually open a facility?
Yeah, like looking back, it's maybe been a year since we started talking, and a little bit more.
A little bit more, yeah.
But when Zoe approached us to start like climbing at GP, it was like something just clicked, and we were like, oh, why is she just like trying to come here in the off hours? Like, why isn't somebody providing what we're currently providing to adults just for kids? New York City it's a huge city. There's a lot of people that live here, a lot of resources. And so for us, it was like, well, we know a lot of great coaches, Zoe, Dennis, Jenna. We've operated a climbing gym for a few years, and kind of the same ideas and principles of like just focusing on the one segment of the population. And, we kind of brought the idea to Zoe, and she's like, that's a great idea. Like we kind of were just joking, like nobody's done it before. Why? And we did spend some time like trying to think of, those questions and why no one's done it before. And we're like, if anybody's going to do it or take the leap, it's going to be us. So we started working on signing a lease, and that moved pretty quickly. And we were kind of just rushing from lease signing to opening the gym in early September. So trying to hit the start of the season.
That's quick.
Yeah, we built the gym, and so we signed the lease in the middle of May. There was just some like regular construction work, like bathrooms, lighting, and stuff that we were all like doing. And the walls got delivered in the middle of August, and we opened September 7th.
Yeah, that really surprises me because I've been, again, tangentially involved in a handful of gyms, and it's always like, it's always young guys. They're like, we're so excited. Here's a gym. We're going to open up in 6 months. I'm like, no, you're not. Like it's going to be 2 years, and then it's going to somehow even be longer somehow because it's difficult. But, maybe because you guys had opened an initial one and then moved. And it's funny because I call you guys GP 81. I'm pretty sure that was like Greenpoint 81. Yep. Is that right? So that was your old location. But I guess you've maintained the name in your new location. But yeah, congrats on doing that. And I know it's really early, so we don't have to get detailed, but I'm curious about how you guys are structuring the model and making it work financially, because I would assume it's a little bit of a different model where typically gyms make their money off of memberships, and I don't know if that's, is that revenue stream number one when it comes to a youth training center, or is it, a different kind of model?
Yeah. I mean, without going into like a lot of detail, it's pretty much the same thing. It's all like membership based. And, we are working with, 3 coaches at the moment, and, we're continuously trying to grow that program for, we have a rec team and what is it?
We have a development team and a competitive team.
Yeah. And so I guess that would be the main part of the income, I would say. And then, we're trying to build the rest of the programming, which for us means we're doing open hours, so day pass traffic, some private lessons. And, we're hoping to get started with some team rentals, like trying to bring other teams from the city or the tri-state area to come in and see the benefit of no one else but you guys climbing in the facility. And so that would be one of the things that we want to really like, throw out there. And, also working with like local schools around here in the neighborhood or in the area that, for kids to come in and try rock climbing for the first time ever. And if it's just a field trip or whether it be something that they can integrate into their PE for the season, like we would love to do any of that.
Oh, very cool. Oh, I love it. As a parent, if I were to think about a facility where I would want my kids to learn climbing, it's such a huge, big bonus when you look at a place that takes it so seriously that it's dedicated to the kids. Like it's very different to say, yeah, we have a kids team. Like, well, is your daughter 4 yet? Because sure, we'll just toss her in. Like, who cares? The afterthought versus putting a lot of effort into it is just, again, I mean, it seems like that's a theme from both GP81 to the youth training center as well as just that care from, even from hold shaping. I'm not sure who this question is directed at, but I'm kind of curious to hear about the wall design and the angles, because we just kind of went into that in the more adult training facility. How did that work for the youth training facility? I don't know if Zoe, you were involved in that or if that was more of Julian's area.
I was not super involved in that, I would say. I came into it with an idea of what I felt like some of the commercial gyms lacked in terms of adequately preparing the kids for the competitions that they would see later in the year. And a lot of that was slab. There's just like not a ton of slab in the city. And it has always felt like a limiting factor to our athletes once they get to nationals. So that was important to me that we had slab. I also really love the wall angles at original GP. I'm a fan of like clean, simple, steep, or, low angle without a ton of angle changes. And so I think that kind of played a role in what we decided to do, but we consulted people who really, really knew what they were doing. We had lots of friends who were excited to help us and give their 2 cents. So yeah, that was a big part of it.
It's amazing that there's not just more slab in general in gyms, because whether we like to admit or not, most climbers are still on the newer side. And I would argue that they benefit more from low angle terrain than steep terrain. I mean, I love swinging around on a 60-degree. Even me probably needs to spend more time on slab. Actually, Zoe, I almost think about it like when I did gymnastics, we would spend more time on floor than anything. And I was like, Coach, I want to be on the bars. Of course, I'm like, I was upper body. Of course, that's how I ended up in climbing. Bars, let's do the P bars. And he said to me, look, the skills that you learn on floor, like the hollow body, the shapes that you do, actually the same shapes we exhibit on each event. And so I kind of think about slab where it's like, can you put weight on your feet? Okay, I know you want your fingers to be strong. I know you want to have big shoulders, but can you put weight on your feet and move smoothly there? And so, yeah, just shout out to slab gliding.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of, I think, translation from slab to other styles of climbing. And I think there's kind of like a general dislike of slab across.
It's not sexy.
Yeah, but isn't it? Like, I don't know.
I'm just saying what I see.
Yeah.
I don't think it's sexy either. Yeah. Okay. So Zoe, you are now blessed with the ability to have a facility where your kids don't have to share it with adults. How did you think about, like, when you start from scratch, like the principles or philosophy around having a youth team? I don't know if that's how you approach it exactly. There's a lot of practicality about just, getting holds in the wall, having these angles, but, any kind of overriding things that when you had this blank slate that you came to the table, as?
Yeah, I think that one of the most important things to me was that my values and goals were aligned with the people who I was working with. And that was pretty immediately obvious with Cliff and Julian, that we shared a lot of the same values of creating a tailored space for the demographic that we were trying to cater to, and being down to earth and authentic and real. And it was also important to me that the other coaches that we brought on share the values in coaching, specifically that not everything is centered around performance outcomes. Obviously, climbing is a competitive sport, and I coach competitive rock climbing, and so performance outcomes matter. They matter to the kids, certainly. They matter in the grand scheme of being a competitive climber. But I have found that when that is the primary focus, a lot of things just tend to go south, and it ends up being to the detriment of the athlete in the long term. So creating a foundation of failure really was something that was important to me. Creating a space where the kids feel safe and supported to fail really, really hard and messy. And for us to be able to kind of lead by example and admit when we make mistakes or don't know the answer to a question, so that the kids feel comfortable doing the same thing. So that was kind of like the core foundation of my philosophy coming into the TC.
I do think climbing is somewhat unique in that we fail just all the time. And I think it actually does build strong relationships with each other, because you basically are just seeing your friends fail and how are they when they fail, and that probably starts early. So I guess the thing that's interesting to me is that I know that just making your placing results the only thing, or you sending your project or not the only thing, is kind of problematic, because we fail a lot and you can't always control outcomes. And if you hang your entire self-worth on getting first, and then your foot slips or something happens, like it can be, I'll tell you, there's tears in my past from that. And I don't know if that's a good way to build a love of a sport that you can do for a lifetime. Maybe it's better in gymnastics where you only get to do it until you're 14. So the question I have about that is, so how do you deal with that on the nuts and bolts? Like if you have someone who is, psyched on climbing and loves it, but you may have right next to them someone who is really interested in, winning a World Cup or being on that track, and you have to manage, the different goals while still keeping it healthy.
Yeah, I've actually found that it's not as difficult to manage disparate goals as I originally thought that it was going to be. I think that as long as there is a foundation of motivation and determination in both of those athletes, the athlete that is, excited about getting better at rock climbing, kind of just in general, and the climber who is an Olympic hopeful, the systems that you have to build to help them reach their individual goals aren't that different, right? And, I think that for the Olympic hopeful, I am very excited to help support someone in the pursuit of that goal. I think it is an incredibly brave and vulnerable thing to admit that you are striving for something as grand as the Olympics. And I'll do everything to help set that person up for success. But it's also really important to me that that athlete understands that outcomes aren't guaranteed. And we can do everything to set you up for success in my power, in my scope of knowledge. And it might not happen, right? And so the Olympic hopefuls, the kids who want to make finals at nationals or go to youth worlds, I need them to know, to go into this with eyes wide open, that we are going to do our damnedest. And I'm going to try and help support you in your goal. But ultimately, you might fail. And hopefully, in focusing on the process just as much as the outcome, we can develop an athlete who is resilient to that failure and who can appreciate what they have learned throughout the process.
Okay, this is a really tricky question, but I love that you said that there's a vulnerability with raising your hand and saying, like, I do want to go to the Olympics, because in some ways, you're basically setting up your terms for success and failure. Like you're saying, if I don't do this, I've failed. And that can be that's a vulnerable thing. So I'm curious, again, tricky question. Do you ever run into the situation where people actually do want to be in the Olympics or want to climb the world's first 516, but they kind of won't admit it to themselves? Or, how do you help them actually chase the thing that they truly do want to chase?
Yeah, all the time. And at all levels of goal, I see that people kind of undercutting themselves. One of the phrases that I use a lot with the athletes that I work with is own your goals. And the analogy that I use is Google Maps. Like let's say I'm trying to get to the Empire State Building, but I type into Google Maps the Statue of Liberty. Am I going to get to the Empire State Building? No, I'm not. So I'm like setting myself up for failure from the moment I get started because I'm not willing to admit the thing that I actually want. And I think one of the most important processes for the athlete to understand is the failure is going to hurt just as bad, whether you've said it out loud or not. Like you're not really protecting yourself in the long run by lying to yourself and to those who want to support you and saying, yeah, like I just want to make semifinals. I'll be happy with semis. No, you won't. You want finals. Okay. So like, let's set ourselves up to go to finals because we can't do that unless you own it.
Julian, you were an Olympic hopeful. I just feel like I gotta hear you chime in on training for the Olympics, setting your own goals or chasing other people's goals. Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about your history with the Olympics?
Yeah. So I grew up in Colombia, and I started diving at the age of 6, and I pretty quickly moved my way up to the national team and started training and competing with the national team. And I guess everybody's goal at that point was just, keep diving until you qualify to go to the Olympics. And I don't feel like, looking back, maybe I never said it. I always thought that it could be a possibility. We were very competitive and we were all ranked in a place where we could potentially all make the Olympics. But for me, it was probably somebody else's dream. Or I would say my coach and my dad mostly. And so the only thing I would say that it's tough to, I guess, deal with is the fact that I was close enough to it, that I should have seen it through, but it just wasn't my thing. And so it was probably something that I was chasing for a long time that I wasn't really the thing that I wanted to do. It was just there because it was the next step.
Yeah, gosh, that's wild to do something from 6 years old competitively. I can't remember being six, and the idea that you would know exactly what you were chasing at six seems unlikely. My question there is, what did you learn from chasing an extremely high level goal? Even if it wasn't exactly your goal, there must have been something in that pursuit of excellence that you took from.
Damn, that's a great question. I don't know. I think the one thing that I learned was to be humble. And this was something that was instilled in me by my coach from a very young age. He was like, you, as a diver, you're always going to chase perfection. And, you know, whether you win or not, you're never going to be perfect. And so he was just like, whether you win or not, there's always something for you to work on. And so if you won, we're going to go back immediately after, and we're going to go and try the same dives multiple times until we get a little bit closer. You know, for me, that just meant like hard work, you know, dedication, and just like really throwing myself at everything and just like being genuine with my intentions. And, you know, that's pretty much all I got from it.
I don't know if that's not all you got. That's great. That's the idea of like the infinite game in a way, and that the process is the part that matters, and that there's always something to work on. And because it's like that in any sport, where even if you win, are you going to win next time? And the time after that, even if you do that rock climb, was there a way for you to do it better? And I've kind of seen this, you know, I get to talk to a lot of really great climbers, and something that I see time and time again, which I'm trying to imbibe into my style, is absolute obsession with beta and technique. I often like trying really hard, and my go-to toolkit is like, oh, what if I just try even harder? And that's probably, you know, necessary as part of doing your best, but it's how you direct that, and that infinite refinement is a good lesson, whether it's, you know, climbing, diving, business. And yeah, so let's go back to more of the nuts and bolts, Zoe, of, I'm always curious when you deal with kids and training them, you know, you often have like a broad swath of abilities and morphology. I mean, I guess that happens in adults too, but maybe more extreme in youth. Yeah. How do you handle like the different skill levels and setting for them, and then making it a little bit harder? Or, you know, it's great that you now have an environment that isn't static, that you can adjust with route setting. But any thoughts on just how you deal with that big spectrum of abilities and morphology?
Yeah, I think that a lot of that falls on the setting team, of which I am not. But I think that one advantage we had going into this particular endeavor is that most of the kids who are on our competitive team, either myself, Jenna, our other coach, or Dennis, our head coach, had worked with in the past. So we were pretty familiar with their styles of climbing, their skill levels, their strengths, their challenge points. And so that made it a little bit easier for us to tailor the route setting to those athletes. And it's certainly been difficult in certain situations. We started a development team. We currently only have 2 athletes on that team, and making sure that the gym has climbs that are accessible to them, but also like productive for the older kids is hard. It's difficult to figure out. And I think it comes from time and practice and experience. And I think we're super, super fortunate to have Jenna on our team, because she can tweak things in real time. And that's been one of the most fun things to see at practice, is kids like maybe a little bit too scared, or a little bit too short, or the foot's a little bit too small. And it's really exciting to be able to say like, oh, like I can fix that right now. We can scale this move so you can learn it and then make it harder again. And so that's felt like a real luxury.
Quick break while I tell you about today's sponsor. Thank you to all the patrons who help make this show possible. Join them so you can get episodes early before anyone else, and those episodes are ad-free. As a patron, you also get to submit questions for upcoming guests. The answers to those questions are only available to patrons. Follow the link in the show notes to join now. You also get access to a private Discord where you'll find me and other people who want to go from good to great. Okay, back to the pod. Something that blows my mind with climbing and as you go up the difficulty levels is just how subtle differences make a huge difference. So moving that foot chip 1 Tina over and just having to stretch that extra couple inches completely changes everything about the climb. And I know that it was a frustration of mine that I actually ameliorated by having my own spray wall where you go, what if I just move this chip a little further? And it really changes technique. And so, yeah, I love the idea of if you have a kid having a bunch of success, you can also just make it a little more uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit last time about just this term like high performance. And you mentioned earlier that not everyone's goal is going to be the Olympics, although good on them if they want to tackle that. Can you talk more about what that means in context of coaching different kids and what they're seeking? Just what does it mean to help these kids reach their best or have high performance?
I think that my hope is that each of my athletes that we work with develops their own definition of what high performance is for them. And in that definition, hopefully they share it with their coaches so that we can help them to pursue what that means. I think that on the surface, like if you say high performance in relation to a competitive sport, you think of a few things, right? In climbing, you think of sending hard grades, you think of podiums, you think of World Cups and the Olympics, right? And I think that that is one brand of high performance. But ultimately, at a competition, there is one winner. And if I'm creating a system that only rewards one person that walks away from a comp, that's a failure to me. So for me, success looks like helping the athletes diversify and deepen their definitions of success and high performance to include things like developing resilience or adaptability or, learning a particular technique or overcoming a fear. If an athlete can graduate from our program and have the tools to reset after being incredibly frustrated at a competition or be able to do a move that they previously didn't think was possible for them, or, support their teammate who had suffered an injury. That's a win for me. That's high performance.
Something that's really interesting about climbing, in very direct contrast to gymnastics, is that there literally is very different definitions of high performance because the disciplines can be so different. I mean, a high level performance on speed climbing is very different from a high level trad route performance outdoors. I mean, it's just, sure, they both love climbing and they probably have some basic skills, but you can't just swap them and say, and now you're good at this. I'm curious if you're seeing more athletes come to the team with different ideas about what they want out of climbing, because I know when I started climbing, I just wanted to reach the top of the wall, right? Like I know it sounds trite or obvious, but there was also a roof. And I just thought, oh, that's real climbing, is being upside down up there. And the idea that competing was part of climbing actually didn't really occur to me in the beginning. And it almost seemed strange. What are we competing for? What does it mean? Difficulty was almost a foreign concept because it was more about just getting to the top. And yeah, I'm just kind of curious if you're seeing kids come in hyper focused on the Olympics now that we actually are in the Olympics, or if you're seeing people with maybe goals that, I don't know, fall into the outdoor category or something entirely different.
Yeah, I think I see the full spectrum. We have kids on our team who are super psyched on outdoor trad climbing, outdoor bouldering. We have kids I think we have a couple of kids who are Olympic hopefuls in this moment in their lives. And then we have kids who are looking to do the best that they can in the scope of youth comps. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of diversity in the things that people want to get out of being on our team. And I think we have a lot of kids on our team who are there for the community and they like rock climbing and maybe they kind of like competing, or maybe they don't like competing at all. Maybe they don't even like climbing outside at all, but they like the movement of climbing that we have to offer at the training center, and the community is important to them. And so they're there and they're bought in to try hard in the way that we ask them to try hard. And that's really, I think, the connecting thread is, are you psyched to put forth effort? on this shared thing.
I want to go back to that tricky question I had earlier, because there's just something about that I think is really fun. I remember when I competed, I would get really nervous and scared. I even threw up before nationals when I was, 11 or 10 years old or something. And there's a lot of signs I could point to that said, I don't like this. Literally it caused me stomach discomfort. But I would always perform quite well. And, there's this like tension there of like, I don't like it. And I see it with my daughter too. She was performing in the Peanut Cracker, like a little ballet. And before it, she said, "This is the worst day ever. I have to go dance on stage in front of people." And then later she said, "This was the best day ever. I got to perform dancing in front of everyone." And just understanding, I guess, you have a master's in sports psychology, understanding like when to nudge. It could be kids, but could be anyone towards something that causes them stress, but stress isn't bad unless it is too much or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I think that there's a line to walk there. But I think 9 times out of 10, when an athlete is suffering from, pre-performance anxiety or, getting so frustrated or upset at competitions that they're seemingly not enjoying the experience, if you can help them to manage that anxiety just enough to reconnect with the love of the sport, that usually goes a really long way. And I think usually I'm able to help athletes achieve that little change in how they frame their experiences. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
It definitely does, but I would appreciate if you share some of the techniques you use.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the athlete. Something that's really important to me in my practice is building deep relationships with the clients that I work with and understanding them as a whole person. So for, one kid, it might be, maybe they're a musician and they use breath work because they play a wind instrument, and helping them connect how they breathe through their wind instrument to how they're going to breathe before they get on a boulder. That can be really helpful. I have, for those of you who are Stranger Things fans, a lot of fans of Stranger Things on my team, and asking them to try and like connect with their effort in the same way that some of the characters do on that television show can be really powerful. So using imagery, using breath work, but understanding like what's going to connect to that kid, right? So there is no one size fits all. You have to really try to understand what is important to each individual athlete so that I can find like the little magic bullet that can help break through for them.
What a good coach. Julian, you may have competed a time or two. Any thoughts on this topic?
Man, I don't know. It's been so long since I dove last or competed. I honestly, I feel like I was too young to even know or like remember how I felt at that time. But to me, it was just like show up and just dive. And if anything, it was just, I was actually afraid of heights when I was diving. And so,
and now you're a climber. Great. Good call.
Yeah. And so it was more like, just make sure you don't die while you're diving, make sure you hit the water and not the platform or anything else. And so having these conversations and looking back, I wish I had someone like Zoe as part of my support structure. Because I think that I very quickly lost any passion or love for the sport, and having someone that I would have been able to talk to or like connect with outside of just like physical performance, seeing me as a human more than just like an athlete, it would have made a huge difference. And so I think I would have potentially stayed with it or whatever, or just fall back in love with it or something. But yeah, I mean, competing is exciting and also very stressful, and kudos to the kids that like love it and are chasing it. And if Olympics is the dream, then we're here to support it. So
I've done a few podcasts with Melina Costanza, who's an incredible female competitor, and some of my favorite podcasts too. I encourage anyone who hasn't listened to them to check them out. And she had this term that she either got from her coach, who I want to say is Tyson, I can't remember his name, Vertical World. I think she might have gotten this from him, but this idea of pressure is a privilege. And I have thought about it a lot. I don't know if I can tell my 5-year-old daughter pressure is a privilege. I'm not sure it would quite connect there, but I do like in anything in life that, oh, you care about something. Oh, you're in a place where maybe you're on stage or you have a lot of eyes on you. Lucky you. Like, and also a hint for anyone who is in that world, maybe unless you're on the Olympic stage, it probably doesn't matter that much. And what matters is that you show up the next day and keep competing and keep showing up. And we build so much into these single moments, whether you're on a trip and you want to do that boulder before you go home or whatever, like feels like it matters, but 3 days later, probably doesn't matter as much. Zoe, something that we talked about a little bit that is kind of connected to this idea of dealing with kids who need that connection, need to be talked to, like Julian, you wish you had someone. It feels like a lot of sport, especially gymnastics, just kind of throws kids into the grinder and see who comes out the other side. So, Julian, you talked about some of your ways to manage the pressure, and they were like, oh, I hope I don't die. Like that probably wasn't like the best way to do it. But, so there's a mental component there. In gymnastics, it's like, well, do you need shoulder surgery yet? Because if you need shoulder surgery, you're not going to make it. Sorry. Like you need to postpone that till your 20s. And I mean, Zoe, what I want to just hear about is how we can structure programs so that we're not just throwing kids into it and seeing who comes out the other side. And those are our champions. As a parent, I know that there's a good chance my kid won't make it to the Olympics, even if they say, this is really what I want to do. It's not always up to them. And how do you structure these programs, even for the ambitious ones, so that they're not just broken and injured and want to leave the sport if they don't achieve their goal? It's an important thing that you're trying to help these kids with so that they come out better, even if they don't make it to the Olympics.
Yeah. Well, I think that talking about mental performance is really important. I think that including the kids in those conversations is really, really important. And I start those conversations with the kids as young as 8 or 9 years old. And obviously the conversation with an 8 or 9-year-old is very different from a 15, 16-year-old, but we incorporate a lot of sports psychology into our practices. We take time out of rock climbing and weightlifting to sit down in large groups and small groups and talk about different things. We had a sports psych session a couple days ago where the kids talked about 4 different questions. I probably won't remember all of them, but my favorite one was 10 years from now, how do you want to remember your time as a climber, as a competitive youth climber? And really what I was trying to get at with that question is, do you want to look back on this and remember the stress of wanting to win? Do you want to look back on this and, remember standing on the podium? Maybe that is what you want. And that's awesome. But, a lot of the answers were more, I want to feel like I've taken advantage of the resources that I had. I want to feel like I asked for help when I needed help. I want to feel like I was brave when I was afraid. I think people underestimate kids a lot and don't think that they have the capacity for having those conversations. And I think that they really, really very much do. And so I think we just have to talk to them and educate and have them be a part of the conversation, which is really what we're trying to do with the TC, is like give the kids a voice, get them in the conversation so that they have ownership of this process.
I want to be brave when I feel afraid. I think for me, that's the one that is so important in being young and then carrying that into being older is we often talk about self-confidence or, and how sports can lead to having higher self-confidence. But I really believe self-confidence is wholly earned internally. It may not even be standing on the podium. It's when you're struggling, whatever that means, that you face your fears in whatever that way means, because it's not always just, doing a dangerous move, or it may be just signing up for a competition, whatever the case may be. And I just find that interesting that that's something that they said, because I'm not sure there's anything more important that I would want, not just my kids to learn, but even me today. It's something you have to always renew, is like, am I the kind of person that when it gets hard, I run from it, or I say, okay, like this is who I am today. So, okay, I feel like we could talk more and more about sports psychology. And I love that you're bringing that into the youth. I'm also just a little curious. You said weightlifting, and I don't need to hear their sets and reps of each exercise, but I'm kind of curious a little bit about what it means to be a youth and training for, whether it's, the Olympics or outdoor trad climb. Like, what do you do with young kids when it comes to off the wall training?
Yeah, we have a strength and conditioning program that we use. Myself and the other coaches have built out a season-long macro, and we follow that. It's a mixture of a couple different like periodization models. And it's pretty simple. They're doing things like an upper body pulling movement, an upper body pushing movement, a lower body pulling movement, a lower body pushing movement. And the kids that are able to add weight to those movements so that they can build strength and resilience in their joints. And it's really just as much about helping the athletes develop strength as it is about injury prevention. Also, I like weightlifting for the kids because it helps them learn how to try hard in a really kind of distinct, discrete way that they wouldn't otherwise be able to really distill in rock climbing itself.
Is the facility a bouldering only facility, or is there ropes as well?
Bouldering only.
Okay. How do you tackle lead climbing or the need to have ability on sport routes?
Yeah, I think that it's actually pretty easy to train for sport climbing in a bouldering gym. It's not too hard to develop the power endurance and aerobic fitness in a bouldering facility. We also rent space at a rope climbing facility nearby, because I think that especially for the athletes who are lead climbing, getting on lead is important because it's heady and scary and comes with cruxes beyond the endurance piece. And importantly, we are in the process of building a spray wall, which is going to make a huge difference to our ability to train for sport climbing.
The idea of falling and headiness and fear, I remember being terrified as a kid lead climbing. And it's actually like something I think sounds terrible, but I think I was so scared and so traumatized by it that somehow it's what even keeps me in climbing or brought me back to climbing. It's just so intense and exciting. I remember doing my first 12A in Smith Rock, and it was just this famously run out, scared the crap out of me. But then I will say I was brave and I met my fears. So maybe I'll rephrase that. I wasn't traumatized. It was so intense, and I was very proud of being able to confront that fear. And that's what keeps bringing me back. How do you handle kids that are afraid of falling? Because the truth is that most of us are more afraid of falling, even though we're on lead and it's very safe, than we'd like to admit. And it hinders us.
Yeah. I historically had been terrified of lead climbing. I like it quite a bit more now after having more exposure to it. But I think it really comes down to being really intentional with working through the fear. I think a lot of clients that I've worked with have come to me and have kind of expressed, I'm scared of lead climbing. And I kind of just thought that if I did it more, I would no longer be afraid. But it's not really as simple as just doing the thing more. It's about doing the thing more intentionally, and really understanding what aspects of the process are scary to you. Is it hanging on the rope? Is it trusting your gear? Is it trusting your belay partner? Is it that you are super pumped and you feel like you're going to fall while you're flipping? So helping them to really interrogate and engage with exactly what aspects of lead climbing are scary to them, I think is step one. And then graded exposure. So helping them to take small steps towards making progress on that fear and mastering the fear, and making sure you don't push them over the edge, because I think that that's, where you reach the point of no return and you end up traumatizing a kid.
Julian, is that how you're going to approach your fear of heights?
I mean, I think after I stopped diving, it got better. And like when I started climbing, it just wasn't really there. I actually started lead climbing when we first started ice climbing, my buddy and I. So
Whoa, okay.
I kind of introduced myself to climbing by like mountaineering, ice climbing, rope climbing, and down to bouldering. And so it's been an interesting path. But yeah.
I'm pretty sure when you're ice climbing, you should be afraid because my understanding is that falling isn't really an option there. But maybe I'm wrong. That's definitely not my expertise.
No, you're right.
Great.
Just don't fall.
Just all right. That's Julian's approach, is just go into the deepest end possible, and that's an interesting way to do great exposure. All right. So it sounds like in general your coaching has been with youth climbers. Is there anything that you notice that kids do well that adults don't, or vice versa? And, just because I have a lot of adult listeners, a lot of us have kids also, but there's always something to learn from others, even if they are below your level or if they're way above your level. And so I'm just kind of curious if you've noticed any lessons to be gleaned from that difference.
Yeah, I learned something from the kids that I coach every single time I get to coach them. I think there's like a lot of cross-generational trash talk that happens, especially from, I guess, like millennials to Gen Z and vice versa. And I feel really confused by it because I have a front row seat to all of these kids who are Gen Z and I guess Gen Alpha. I think is the other one below that.
I didn't know there was a new one.
Idea.
That's scary.
I think there's a new one.
Okay.
Yeah. And they are some of the bravest, most courageous, vulnerable people that I have ever met. What they have to do, what they have to face in order to pursue the goals that they have is incredible. The amount that they have on their shoulders with school, especially in New York City, is absolutely insane. And the way that they are able to ask for help and support each other and take care of themselves is profoundly inspiring to me. I just think the world of them. I think they're so incredible. And I think that we could all learn by watching them.
In my adult life, I've noticed that if I have a really busy work week or month, I struggle to perform in my climbing, and it's not a big surprise. Although I think that it did take me by surprise because I thought, oh, well, that's just me sitting in front of a computer. What's hard about that? Like, why can't I go and, crank hard right after that? But I can't. And I don't think that's just my age. I think it's like there's a term, allostatic load, something like that, just general stress levels. Do you see that with kids as well? Like if they're coming up on finals, and even though finals in, 8th grade doesn't sound that intense, like it is, maybe especially in New York City. Yeah. Do you like tone it down for them, or do you have to deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's one of the things that's most difficult for kids to understand. And it sounds like it's difficult for adults to understand too, is that stress is stress, right? Regardless of whether it's more climbing or if it's work stress or home life stress or school stress, you're kind of spending your body dollars when you are doing things, right? When you're working or climbing or schooling. I remember particularly this one moment last year with one of my kids. She was just incredibly stressed by school. She was, I think, a sophomore at one of the largest schools in the country, Brooklyn Technical High School. And she was kind of on the verge of tears, like just all throughout practice. But she's one of the hardest workers ever. And she would never let up unless really forced to. And so I sat down with her after practice for an hour and we made a spreadsheet on Google Sheets. And we just like accounted for her time minute by minute between that moment and when her finals were going to be over, and helped her manage, when she was going to let up on climbing and where she was going to be able to kind of maybe not hold herself to the same high standards that she has for all of her academics. So yeah, I see it a lot. And I think that's the balance between high performance and health. Is sometimes I tell a kid to go home early because they have to study for an exam and they're tired. And maybe that means they're missing out on some climbing, but it's not helping anyone if they're at climbing tired and stressed and thinking about all they have to do when they get home from the gym. So yeah, I see it a lot. And I think it's important to see the kids as whole humans that have a whole life and not just rock climbing.
What is the most common thing you see causes kids to stop climbing?
That's a great question. A belief that their abilities are static, that they can't make the progress that they want to make.
I'll share my little anecdote. Actually, no, I would say that what stopped me from climbing, I was a really early, I've been climbing since I was like 7 or 8. And so like over 30 years, there weren't a lot of young kids. And when all of my climbing partners left for college or left, losing that community is really what made me stop. So I'll just emphasize how important having friends and, enjoying the community side of it. But I alluded to me having tears from a poor placing. I got second in nationals, and I actually thought that I should have won. And you can hear in my voice, I'm still a bit irked. But here I had an excellent placing in my first year ever competing, but was still heartbroken. I wish someone had, said, don't worry, there's another year. And, oh, by the way, puberty is coming to, let's just stick at it for a little bit. And it's something that I think is hard to remember as a kid, is that, boy, do things change for you. Boy, do they change. And if anyone is malleable and has the ability to grow, literally, it's kids. So let me ask you, Julian, you stopped diving. Yeah. What made you quit? And, any lessons to learn there for us as climbers or for parents with kids who climb or do any kind of sport?
So I stopped climbing competitively when I left Colombia. My mom moved here to just find a better life for us. And then I followed a year after. And so I didn't really have the same systems of, access to the pool or my coaching or any of that. And so it kind of just faded a little bit. And I was very lucky that one of my PE teachers in high school, she happened to be a diver recreationally. And she was like, hey, we should go and start diving again. And she ended up actually creating a swim team and a diving team to allow me the opportunity to be seen by recruits and colleges. And, it's pretty much the only reason why I was able to get into school, into college. I went to Stony Brook. I dove there for 4 years. And then after that, it was just, that's it. I did it. At some point you just get burnt out. There's just too much pressure on myself. And I would say not enough reward. I don't know what that reward was that I was looking for. Maybe it was still the Olympics. But that was certainly very far away from where I had been in the past at that level. And so it just, the most logical answer there was just stop diving.
Yeah, this is what I love about climbing, is that we're not on here doing a podcast about being 30-year-old gymnasts or diving either. Not a lot of 30-year-old plus divers is my hunch. And climbing has the chance to be a lifelong endeavor. And something we talked a little bit about earlier, Zoe, was there's this idea of being healthy and high performance. And a lot of sports, especially early on for children, really sacrifice health for high performance because the overlap may not be quite what they seem. You look at a gymnast and boy, they look great. They look strong and muscular and lean. And then behind the scenes, everything hurts. There can be eating disorders. There can be all sorts of things that you think, you're 15. Maybe, I don't know, that's not so great. And just, I don't know if you have any comment on that, Zoe, with having a bunch of kids where you want to see what's best for them and managing something like an Olympic hopeful and some of the sacrifices that they maybe make, not in terms of eating poorly or doing something like that, but just there's sacrifices that you make in the sense of maybe they don't see their friends as much, and just, working with kids when they're really looking to be extremely high performance and how that kind of relates or doesn't relate to being healthy.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of dissonance on that topic because I do want to help an athlete reach their goals if they are an Olympic hopeful. And I'm not sure that that can be done in an entirely healthy way. But I'm also not sure that it can't be. And I don't know if I get to decide what entirely is healthy for that athlete. And granted, they're most likely a minor in this case. And so I'm not sure that they can really decide what's healthy for them either. And so I think it has to be a collaboration between the coach, the athlete, and the parents. And, hopefully walk the thin line of a sacrifice and time and health. But yeah, I think I don't have an answer because I don't know if there's a way yet. I'm not sure.
Well, I like this idea that I think it's wrong to say it's a foregone conclusion that high performance and health have to be mutually exclusive, but it sure does seem like that currently in a lot of places. And as a parent, like it's a rough thing to hear or think about. And I don't really like that idea. And I will say that parents, they're part of that conversation. Sometimes they're the worst part of that conversation. And, any comments about not necessarily related to that. I want to hear you say negative things about parents and how they might push their kids to live out their own dreams. Cause I didn't make it to the Olympics, so my kid's better. But any comments about being a good parent for your kids and helping them achieve high performance, whatever that means to them?
I think the parent's role is unconditional positive regard for their climber or their athlete or their kid. I think that it is the coach's job to help structure what systems they need to reach the goals that they have. And it's the parent's job to not change how they interact with their kid based on any changes in their performance, and to feed them and to make sure they get to bed on time and make sure they arrive to the comp on time so there is no undue stress, to be mindful about how they speak about effort and success and winning and climbing, to talk to a sports psych so that they can have the tools necessary to parent a competitive athlete. But yeah, mostly like it's hugs and food and rides.
By the way, this also goes for just being a good climbing partner. Just supporting your friends when they fail, when they succeed, when you know that they're capable of more. I remember this one instance where I knew that a friend of mine had so much capability and she was celebrating. She told me she had just done her first V8. She was very excited and I was excited for her. I didn't want to take it away from her, but that was kind of like her goal. And she did it in a few tries. And I said to her, like, very excited for you. I think you got more in you. And just, you can even have, it's almost like tough love in the sense of, being honest, still being positive, but, even just being a friend to someone saying, that was amazing. You have so much more. Like, not just advice for parents. You can, good for your friends too.
Definitely.
So, Julian, you guys are kind of blazing a bit of a trail with opening this new facility. Do you think that we're going to see these pop up all over the world? I know that there's some youth training facility or youth focused facility. Sometimes it's like a little bit of an adjunct next to typically big, giant mega gyms. Do you think this will catch on, or were you hoping to kind of show the world with this?
I do hope that it catches on. Because I think we need to continue to allow the space for the kids to work with coaches such as Zoe and like the rest of the team that we have here, and like give them the opportunity to decide whatever that success is or whatever that high performance is for them. And I, honestly, like we're just going to continue to do our thing and hope that it catches on. And if not, then it'll just be us here.
I like that. Just focusing on yourself, be the change you want to see, or the best way to predict the future is to make it. I think something like that. Actually, on that note, Julian, how have you seen the gym side change when the Olympics came around, and how is that related to the decision to open the youth training center?
Man, the Olympics what's a huge thing for climbing. There's both positive and negatives. You can say, oh, it's too commercial now and like all those things. But I think ultimately it means that there's just more people in it, more resources put into the sport. I also think that when all that happens, we need to make sure that there's a lot of resources that are allocated to, educating people on outdoor access, bringing in more folks from underrepresented communities into the sport and just opening doors. Is not just like, we're just going to be doing our own thing here and that's it. No, like look at both sides of it, and hopefully climbing continues to be on that main stage in the Olympics, and it'll just make it better for everyone.
What's your take on the Olympics, Zoe? You may not have heard me make this little slip up, but when I talked about the highest goals of a new athlete, I actually said World Cup because I forgot that the Olympics even existed. How have you seen it influence your side of the business or coaching in general?
I think the Olympics is awesome. It's so fun to watch. I think it's such an exciting ultimate goal. Definitely have seen the sport grow and change a lot since climbing was added to the Olympics. I think it's a great opportunity. I think it scares me a little bit because I think that climbing and gymnastics do share a lot of similarities in terms of the fact that they're both strength to weight ratio dependent sports. And we already see this trend like pretty clearly on the World Cup stage and even like local open competitions where the women athletes are peaking a lot sooner than the male athletes. And I get nervous that we're going to start pushing for that or start thinking that because it has happened or because some of, our top performing U.S. national team women have reached their success at a young age, that we have to push young girls to reach their success at a young age. And I don't want that. I don't think that that is necessary or productive or healthy or sustainable. But yeah, I think there's more positives than negatives for sure about climbing being in the Olympics. I agree with Julian that it's kind of blown up the outdoor scene in a way that's also kind of scary. And I'm hopeful that the folks who have been around longer and have that, etiquette down can provide mentorship for the people who are getting into it. And we can find ways to, keep our lands happy and healthy. But yeah, the Olympics is cool. It's really cool.
Actually, one of the best ways to provide that mentorship is through youth teams that people don't know etiquette because no one taught them. It's not because they're dumb. I mean, I had someone literally like brush that tick mark. Like, yeah. Oh, you dropped a piece of tape there. I know you didn't see it, but like, this is why you should pick up any tape that you see, because you may think you're leaving no trace. You're wrong. You're always, accidentally doing things. And on that note of the competition scene seeming to get younger and younger, I've talked to a lot of competitors about this, and my hunch and my hope is that that's more of the quick change in the setting style rather than a certification that you should be 15. It's that when you put in all these new and changing movement patterns, if it's not second nature to you or you didn't grow up doing it, it can be tough to acquire later. And I know like these coordination style moves that we see a lot more of, I actually probably am kind of built for it and have a background in gymnastics and should theoretically be good at them. It's hard to pick up at 30. A lot easier to pick up at 8, And so my hope is, and I actually talked to Malia Costanza about this, is that we don't really know what the peak age, well, and also every athlete is different. So, that may just be a sign of the current times and not so much where it'll settle. So who knows? Yeah.
I think you're right. And I think that's totally true. I think that kids will draw their own conclusions, about who's winning and might not think that deeply about it. So I think that it has an influence regardless of the genesis of how it came to be. But yes, I'm hopeful as well.
That was a really good point. Okay, one last question on Olympics or competitions or the future is something that worries me about high level competitive climbing is it appears very injurious. And it goes along with these coordination or dynamic movements. I mean, yes, you can pop a pulley on a small crimp and bearing down on it. Although honestly, kids shouldn't be having that happen as much because you're almost like not strong enough to hurt your tendons and ligaments. It's like hard to do that. But you toss people into a dynamic jump into a drop knee or a weird, behind the move shoulder as an ex-gymnast with shoulder surgery under my belt. Those ones always the weird shouldery moves. I go, oh no, please don't do that. Yeah. So any thoughts about either how to prepare kids or ourselves for that, or just, any concerns about that kind of setting? Not that we can even control it, but just even if you comment on it as someone who gets to see the aftermath sometimes, probably.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of shared responsibility there, like across the coaches, the people who are like preparing the athletes physically in terms of their strength and conditioning, the route setters, and the officials too, people who make the rules about, the height at which a boulder can end for, X age athlete. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of movements in current youth climbing that have a high potential for injury. I actually see most injuries on like random mistakes. There was a local comp a couple weeks ago where a girl did all of the hard moves on the boulder, all of the coordination moves, and then she got to the top and let go and busted her knee, not for any reason other than bad luck, or maybe she was tired at the end of the comp. And so I think it's maybe less to do with the movements themselves and more to do with how do we teach kids how to assess risk when the stakes are high? Because if the judge is calling 1 minute left on the competition and you have one attempt to go on this boulder, are you going to be motivated or incentivized to take on more risk than you ordinarily would because the perceived benefits of that risk, right? So I think, again, it's another conversation that has to be had continuously with the kids about their bodies and the risk that they're willing to take on.
Just to push on this a little bit more, I got to tell you, as a kid, I'm not sure I even understood that certain moves were risky or not. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, a drop knee is risky? Like, what do you mean? Like, you don't even have that intuition because you haven't hurt yourself yet. How do you have that? How do you help them understand what's risky and what's not?
Talk about it. Yeah. I mean, I think there's some things that are obviously risky, like, dynos at the top of the wall or, downwards dynos, which have been outlawed. And then in terms of the kind of more subtle things like drop knees or like Gaston's, I've also had a few shoulder surgeries. And so I have a boy on my team who's particularly mobile in his shoulders. And so I've had a conversation with him like, hey, this mobility is great. It allows you to do a lot of really difficult moves. Let's keep an eye on it because shoulders are unstable to begin with, and you're putting them in some pretty precarious positions. So I think really just a lot of times the answer is have the conversation and talk about the body, and where its weak points are.
Yeah. And to push back on myself, like I want to see what can be done by the human body. And the way setting works also is you put up holds and it's up to the athlete to show how they get to the top. And you may have an idea of a sequence that's really safe, but you can't control how they climb. It's up to them. And also it's kind of like if you never get exposed to extreme ranges of motion, then the first time you do, you get hurt. And maybe you don't get exposed to it until you're 25. And all of a sudden, like what would have been a normal and safe thing to adapt to from the time you were 8 to 25 suddenly causes you to get that shoulder surgery. And there's a fine line there. I don't know. I mean, Julian, you have a young one now. How do you think about putting your young one into sport and thinking about injuries and the risk involved with them?
Oh man, my son is a year and a half now, and I he's just running around all over the place, and he doesn't really climb that much into like the furniture yet, but you can tell that he's just moving around like he doesn't even know what could hurt him, and like nor should he, right? Like that's our responsibility as parents to make sure that he's okay. But I think with my background in sports, and I guess just talking through what I see as a danger and like potential issues in the future, and like what could be detrimental to his growth and his body, and like I guess his trajectory in whatever sports he decides to play or not. It's I think just being aware and teaching them self-awareness of the body and what those limitations are from a young age is, I think, very important. And if you're going to jump off the couch and I'm not there to catch you, like, well, that's going to hurt you. And, let's maybe not do that again because you hate going to the doctor. And so, okay, you're still a year and a half, but okay, how long do we have to do this for? And so, like it's going to be a lifetime of just all these conversations, I'm assuming. I'm only been doing it for a year and a half, so I don't really know what it's going to look like. So do you have any advice?
No, I mean, that whole thing where you're saying, when you jumped off the couch and it hurt and maybe you don't want to do it again is kind of the way. I'm reminded of this random little anecdote. You guys, have you ever heard of Ido Portal? Probably. Okay. Ido Portal. I did some training and stuff with him and some of his disciples, because I feel like there's some jokes there about being a movement cult. Anyways, one of my friends had I think like a 1-year-old who was just starting to walk, and Ido was at his house and the kid's taking his first steps, and my friend moves his leg. My friend's, the dad moves his leg out of the way for the kid to keep on walking. And Ido was like, no, what are you doing? Leave your leg there. It's like, oh, well, he just started to learn to walk. Like he's going to trip over my leg. It's like, you don't remove the obstacle. Like the obstacle is the way, like let it be there. And, because if he trips and falls, he's going to be okay. And I just thought that was a really interesting, it really stuck with me because we're so tempted to make everything perfect. And that's not really how you deal with injury or risk. You have to be exposed to it. You have to talk about it. Life is not risk-free. In fact, all life is a series of calculated risks. So good stuff, you guys. I said at the top, I love what you both are doing. I love gyms. I love them. They're a special place in my heart where I literally grew up. I love coaches, Zoe. I love them. I love what you're doing. I love the effort and care both of you all are putting into everything you do. Yeah, that'll just bring me to my classic question, and I'll start with you, Zoe. And that's, how do you go from good to great?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times people think that the way to get excellent at something is to work harder at it. And I think it's less about working harder and more about doing the work that's hard for you. I have a lot of clients who come to me with like a gap in their performance. And when I ask them why they think there's a gap, oftentimes their answer is, well, I just need to work harder. And the context that they have for that is I need to pull harder or grab smaller holds or lift more weight or, send harder grades, whatever it is. But I think that it's more often the boring things that they have to focus on, or, the things that are just uniquely challenging to them. Maybe it's getting to bed on time. Maybe it's eating more. Maybe it's mobility. Maybe it's getting a sports psych coach. Maybe it's not overscheduling themselves. Yeah, I think that is how you go from good to great. I think you have to be able to identify your core patterns and see yourself in a really like deep and intimate way, so that you have the actual power and leverage to change the things that need to change.
You realize you just totally called me out from what I was saying earlier, where I just want to try harder. And typically it's about putting the effort in the area that sounds boring to me. I just like to try hard. So I just want to pull harder.
And there's a place for that. I think that, sometimes that is like a kid needs that or an adult needs that. But I think for like true sustainable growth, you have to do more.
Yeah.
Or
No,
different.
that's great. What about you, Julian? How do you go from good to great?
Oh man, I think I just always think back to my diving years, and my coach always just spoke of humility and being humble. And so it was, do the work regardless of whoever sees or doesn't, and just like just grind and don't put your head up until, you're at the top, whatever that looks like. And so I've always been a fan of just working really hard, and regardless of what the noise is out there, right? And so I think I just lean a lot into waking up early, whether someone's sleeping, okay, like no one's going to be doing a session at this moment, or no one's going to be thinking of an idea for this crazy gym that we're trying to put together or anything. It's just like, do it. Just put your head down and work hard. And I think the rewards will always be there.
Big link there between what you said, Julian, and what Zoe said in humility. It's that acknowledging what you actually have to work on instead of just what you want to. And yeah, and then you never get anywhere without that consistent dedication. It's just, what is it? The 10-year overnight success kind of thing. Like it always takes longer than you think. And you guys are great. Before we move on to Patreon, I just wanted to give either of you a chance. Like, did we cover what we should have, Zoe, as far as the coaching work you're doing, or any messaging about coaching, and maybe Julian, if there's anything that you want to say about the state of gyms, what gyms should do, or what direction we should head. Just want to give you guys a chance in case we missed something during our wonderful discussion.
I think the only thing that I would want to add is there are some people who have done this before us that really helped us to guide us in our venture. And so I just want to make sure that, we give credit where it's due, because we have used a lot of really wonderful resources and learned a lot from people who have kind of started this path, and I'm excited to continue it and whatnot. But I don't want to take credit for being the first.
Yes, sir. I'm the one gassing you guys up and putting you on a pedestal. I know that you're part of a group of great coaches. I know that there's a lot of communication within the community, and just happy to get the chance today, though, to highlight what you guys are doing. And I hope there are people who follow in your footsteps, as well as, thanks for paying homage to all those who did it before you and are hopefully doing it as well still.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I mean, I guess for me is pretty similar. I want to just say thanks to everybody that's been with us, like from our staff and all our friends in the community, and, my family and our friends that just have always been so supportive, even when it looked like it wasn't going to work for us. And, we're doing it, and we're always going to continue to work hard on it, because that's where our heart is. And we work with amazing people that are just incredible. Zoe's the perfect example, and everybody else that we work with is just as great. And just super thankful for everyone.
Awesome, you guys. Okay, I've got a couple of Patreon questions, and of course they're going to be tricky. If you want to hear that Q&A and other extra behind-the-scenes content from this episode and others, head over to patreon.com/testpiece to sign up now. Patrons also get their episodes early and ad-free. There's hours and hours of bonus content there to help you on your own path of going from good to great. Still not sure? There's a free 7-day trial for you to check it out. And to help the show grow, please share this episode with someone who would love it. Okay, see you next week.